Hello, how are you? My name is Larissa and I am a realtor in Toronto. Now, I want to go over with you the RECO information guide via Tressa. We're now in phase 2 of Tressa, and I wanted to go through it with you because I want to make sure you understand what is in the guide. So I'll talk a little bit about it with you. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always send me a message or we can chat offline as well. So I'm just going to move myself over here. Let's dive right in. So RECO information guide, working with a real estate agent and the things you need to know. This is a 12-page document. I actually think that RECO did a great job with this. They included a lot of information that I think consumers will find helpful and make everything more transparent. So let's talk about it. The first page of this guide, it says you have received this if you are considering receiving services from a real estate agent or if the realtor is representing a client in the transaction, and you may receive assistance from the agent. So it's just simply telling you why you received the guide. In the guide, they want you to know that brokerage means real estate brokerage, real estate agent, and agent mean a real estate salesperson or broker. You and client mean buyer or seller, and it can also mean leasee or leaseor, so tenant or landlord as well, okay? Can be used interchangeably with buyer and seller. So in this guide, real estate agents in Ontario are now required to provide this to you and to walk through it with you. So you might be watching this so we can walk through it together here, but of course, happy to go through it with you one-on-one on a Zoom call or in person as well. But let's dive right in. So what is inside this guide? Well, first of all, it's going to talk about working with a real estate agent. It's going to describe the benefits of working with a realtor, what to expect, and the responsibilities of realtors and brokerages, as well as clients. It's also going to outline the risks of representing yourself. We now have what's called self-represented parties, or SRPs. So it's going to say if you fall under that category, here are the risks if you choose not to work with a real estate professional. And there will be a professional likely working for the other party in the transaction. So RECO wants to make sure you understand the risks of representing yourself. It's also going to go over signing a contract with a real estate brokerage. So when you work with a real estate agent, you're going to sign a contract with them and their brokerage. It's going to talk about representation agreements, and it's going to highlight what you need to look at in the contracts before you sign, okay? Understanding multiple representation. So this means the brokerage or the agent represents more than one client in the same transaction. And it's going to talk to you about how this works, what the risks are, and whether or not you agree to that. You can now refuse multiple representation in an agreement. And last but not least, it's going to go over with you how to make a complaint. So if you've received service you're not happy with, how can you make a complaint to RECO regarding the brokerage or the realtor? Okay, RECO is just intended to help buyers and sellers make informed decisions. They are not providing legal advice. So you are still able to get legal advice on this document as well. If you do have further questions or you require legal counsel, they ask that you seek that out, okay? So working with the real estate agent, the first part. So agents in Ontario, we must be registered. Okay, we must complete necessary education and carry deposit insurance and professional liability insurance. As a realtor, this is mandatory. Real estate agents provide valuable information, advice, and guidance to buyers and sellers as they navigate the complexities of real estate transactions. So these two lists explain that if you are a seller or if you are a buyer, here are some things your agent might do. They might provide you with comparables to talk about the market and what your value of your property is. If you're a buyer, they might provide comparables for a property you want to buy and let you know what they think the market value is for that property. They could tell you some names and contact information for suppliers, for mortgage brokers, for painters. They might give you a referral to a lawyer, for example. They might give you a home inspector or an appraisal contact. They might also make inquiries for you about zoning and property use. I'm just basically going back and forth between these. But if you read through them, you're going to see that these are some things that your realtor might be able to assist you with if you're a buyer and if you're a seller, okay? So just make sure you read the list, have a clear idea of some of the things realtors can do to help you and some of the benefits that we provide to you. Also goes through here. Here are the things you're going to benefit from the duties of the brokerage and the agent and what we owe you as a client, okay? So we owe you undivided loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, avoid conflicts of interest, okay? So if you are a client of the brokerage, here are all of the things we owe you as a brokerage and as a representative representing you, so you're a realtor, okay? In turn, you have responsibilities as a client. You need to be clear about what you want and don't want. You need to respond to your agent's questions quickly. Understand the terms of your agreement, which is what RECO is providing this guide for. They want you to understand what these agreements are that you're signing, so you don't have to say down the line, I had no idea I signed something that said that, okay? And then you have to pay the fees you agreed to, which we'll talk about on page 7. Make sure you understand the duties that the brokerage and the agents owe you, as well as your responsibilities as a client. They're all outlined clearly here. We just want to make sure everyone knows their role. Excuse me. So, knowing the risks of representing yourself. If you're involved in a real estate transaction and you are not a client of a brokerage, you're considered what we now call a self-represented party. You've chosen to represent yourself, which has different rights and responsibilities, and very few buyers or sellers make this choice. There are significant risks of being an SRP or a self-represented party. You don't have the knowledge and expertise required to navigate the transaction on your own. You're going to be dealing with a buyer or a seller who is benefiting from our services, opinions, and advice of experienced real estate agents, okay? So RECO is giving you an option to be self-represented, but they want to make it very clear that there are risks associated. If you do become an SRP, they suggest you get independent professional advice. And if you choose not to work with an agent, it's your responsibility to look after these things, okay? So you're gonna have to make your own inquiries about zoning. You're gonna have to determine the value of the property without using a realtor for comparables and for their professional analysis. You're gonna have to determine how much you should offer or you should accept if you're on the seller side. Navigating competing offer situations, right? What happens if there's multiple offers? Do you know? Deciding what terms you want to include in an offer and agreement of purchase and sale. So what conditions are you going to include? And you have to write up all those documents or pay someone to do that for you, like a lawyer, okay? And they want to make sure it's clear that the real estate agent is working for another party in the transaction. You're being hindered. You are at a disadvantage going in by yourself. The agent has a duty to do what's best for their client. They want you to be aware that the agent is obligated to share anything that you tell them with their client, which might not be in your best interest. So don't tell them, if you're an SRP, if you tell me your motivation for buying or selling, the minimum or maximum price you're willing to offer and accept, and your preferred terms and conditions, I can then use that against you if I'm representing the other side, right? So if you're an SRP, basically, you cannot use a realtor's skill or judgment on the other side, and you don't want to tell them too much information. I don't think there will be a lot of SRPs in our marketplace, but if this is something you choose to do, you just want to be aware of the risks. And it clearly outlines here, an agent cannot do these things. We cannot provide you with any services, opinions, or advice. We can't do anything that would encourage you to rely on our skill, our judgment, or our knowledge. And we encourage you to represent, we cannot encourage you to represent yourself or discourage you from working with another real estate agent or brokerage, okay? And any assistance that an agent does offer you has to be of service to their client. So for example, if I have a listing and you call me from the internet and you want to view my listing, I will show it to you because it will benefit my seller client. However, I cannot help you to do anything further. I can't tell you which comparables we use to price the home. I can't tell you which conditions that you should put in your offer. I cannot help you write the offer. So there's not much I can tell you besides opening the door for you if it benefits my client. Otherwise, I cannot really help you as a self-represented party. I must give you this form. Agents must give you this form, and we must have you sign off on the information disclosure to self-represented party form before we can provide you with any assistance. Okay, so you have to declare you're a self-represented party, and then we can assist further only if it helps our client and does not use our knowledge, our skill, and our judgment. Okay, so I don't think there's going to be a lot of self-represented parties in the marketplace. I think there's a lot of disadvantages to it, but the option is there if you so choose, and you do have the right to change your mind. So if you're concerned about completing a transaction, you think you want to be SRP, it comes time to do the offer, you think, oh my gosh, I can't do this. Paperwork is confusing. You can get a realtor, okay? You can change your mind. So you can choose to become a client of a real estate brokerage at any point. Moving right along, let's talk about signing a contract with a real estate brokerage. So when you become a client, you sign a representation agreement with the brokerage, which is a contract between you and the brokerage for real estate services and representation. If you don't want to sign an agreement, you should not expect that the realtor is going to provide you with any services like showing you homes, Representation agreements can be called buyer rep agreements or seller representation agreements or listing agreements. And your agreement must be put in writing and presented to you as soon as possible. They want you to protect yourself by reviewing this agreement in detail to avoid any misunderstandings between you and your realtor. Now, this is new with Tressa as of December 5th. There is brokerage representation and designated representation. In the past, we really only had brokerage representation. So let's talk about what these are. With the brokerage representation, the brokerage and all its agents represent you. We all must protect and promote your best interests, okay? So there might be one realtor you're working with, but really the whole brokerage is bound to working with you and protecting your interests, okay? Now, designated representation means that within a brokerage, only one or more of the real estate agents in that brokerage are your designated representative. So this means that I myself will represent you, not necessarily my brokerage. Yes, I belong to my brokerage, but it's really the realtor you're working with that's representing you. And the brokerage and its other agents are just required to treat you impartially and objectively, so not representing your best interests. An important aspect of designated representation is that it reduces the likelihood of multiple representation, which we'll read about together, okay? So this was introduced just recently. Now, what to look for in a representation agreement. Your representation agreement should describe the duties owed to you, the services you'll receive, your rights and responsibilities, what you'll pay, your specific terms, including how long the agreement will last and whether it can be canceled. So here are some key things. When an agent sends you a buyer representation agreement, a listing agreement, or the third one, or seller representation agreements, okay? You're going to want to look for these things. So the name of your designated representative. So if you're going to have a designated representative instead of the brokerage representative, you want to make sure their name is included there. Could also include a couple names if they're on a team, for example. More than one real estate agent working at the brokerage can be identified as your designated representative. It's also going to go over the scope, okay? So it should go over what the brokerage is providing to you or what the designated representative is providing to you, and in what they're going to represent in terms of the property. So, okay, let me explain. If you're a seller, you want to have your address there. If you're a buyer, you want to have the area that the buying agent is helping you in. So it will say here, if you're a seller, this means the agreement will identify the specific property. If you're a buyer, you should consider the scope carefully. Your agreement might identify a specific property, a geographic area, a type of property, or other specific requirements. This is a good example to kind of explain what the scope could be. For example, if you're looking for both a house in a particular city and a cottage property near a lake, and you want to work with different real estate agents with local and property type expertise for each property, the scope should be clear in the agreements to avoid disputes of who you have to pay if you buy property. So if you're looking in City of Toronto with me, and then you're also looking to buy a cottage in North Bay, you're going to use two different agents, okay? And you want to make sure that's clear. So you don't want it to say all of Ontario or all of Canada. So you want to make sure the scope is clear. Also, the services. So this is what I was getting to earlier. So the agreement must clearly set out the services you'll receive. There is no standard set of services. Brokerages offer a variety of service options. This is key. When you are interviewing agents to work with, you should ask them what is included in their services. If you are a seller, does the person you're looking to hire, do they provide staging? Do they pay for photography? What is included in their services, in their fees? You want to make sure it's clear, okay? You might enter into an agreement with a brokerage for a specific purpose, like, for example, having an agent prepare an offer on a property you want to buy, or having viewing a specific property. Some sellers enter into an agreement solely for the purpose of having their property advertised on a local listing service. So ask the real estate agent about the available services or combination of services that might be right for you in your situation. If there are specific services you need or expect to receive, make sure they're included in the agreement or scheduled to the agreement, and don't assume a particular service will be provided if it's not included in the agreement. So just because you interview 10 agents and they all say they're providing staging, don't assume the 11th person will also provide staging, okay? Make sure it's clear. And then payment amount and terms. So you and the brokerage decide the amount you're going to pay for their services. The amount is not fixed or approved by RECO, any governing authority, or any real estate association or real estate board. You can agree to pay a fixed dollar amount. You can pay a percentage of the sale price or a combination of both. The representation agreement cannot specify an amount based on the difference between a property's listing price and what it sells for. So let's say what you cannot do, let's say I list your property for $1 million and I now say to you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if we sell for $1 million, I'll take 2.5% commission. If we sell over $1 million, I want 3%. It doesn't work that way. Okay, they don't allow that. Agreements must also identify circumstances in which the amounts agreed to might change and how they'll change in each circumstance. So if you're a seller, if you're a buyer, if you're a seller, the amount you agree to pay your brokerage for the services and representation you received needs to be clearly indicated. The amount you agree to pay, if any, to compensate the buyer for the brokerage fees, and how the amounts you agree to pay might change if you consent to multiple representation. Okay, so you might say to your agent, hi agent, if we get an SRP or we get someone you represent both parties, I want to reduce your commission by X, Y, or Z. You want to make sure you're having those conversations up front so that circumstantially, if the commission is going to change, doesn't always, but if it does, you want to make sure that's outlined. Okay. Similarly, for a buyer, you want to make sure that the commission you are paying, if you are paying a commission, is included. In most cases, the seller will pay the commission, but there are certain circumstances where a buyer might have to pay. You want to make sure that you go through that with your agent. If you are my own client, I'd be happy to chat with you about that, but you want to make sure basically that the payment and terms are clear. They also put here an important note for buyers. A seller might not offer any amount to cover the fees you owe to your brokerage under your agreement. This could affect the amount you are able to offer for a property. Depending on your financial circumstances, you might not be able to afford to buy the property if the seller does not agree to pay your brokerage fees. So generally, agents are paid for by sellers. If the seller refuses to pay, the agent technically could ask the buyer to cover that commission. Again, this is a conversation you're going to want to have with your specific realtor as to how this will be handled. As we continue, termination provisions. So the agreement should list all circumstances when the agreement can be terminated. Review when the brokerage can terminate the agreement and make sure you're aware of any penalties or costs that might apply in each case. And then here's two things they want you to be aware of. So multiple representation, we talk about this in length shortly, but you do not have to agree to multiple representation, and your agreement should be clear about what happens in that situation. For example, the agreement could terminate completely, or you might be referred to another brokerage or designated representative for the specific transaction, and then changing your designated representative. If you've entered an agreement with a designated representative, so with a specific agent at a brokerage, the brokerage cannot appoint a different designated representative unless you agree to it. They may ask to appoint someone else if, for example, your designated rep stops working with the brokerage or is otherwise not available. So let's say they go on vacation. They can't just simply say, this is your new person. They must go over it with you and make sure that you agree. Okay? Also, expiry date. So the agreement's expiry date must appear prominently on the first page. You actually have to sign an initial right beside it, so it says that you've seen it. There is no set time or standard term for a representation agreement. It can be a day, a week, a few months, a year. It really depends. Consider how long you want this agreement to remain in place. Make sure you know when your agreement will expire. And keep in mind, a holdover clause could mean you owe money even after the expiry of the agreement. So in the agreement you sign, whether it's the buyer representation agreement or the listing agreement, you are going to have a holdover clause, and you want to know how many days are in that holdover clause. Okay, most representation agreements include what is called a holdover clause. This may require you to pay the brokerage fees for a purchase or sale even when the transaction happens after your rep agreement expires. The clause will specify the time the holdover clause is in effect from the date the agreement expires. It's there to protect the brokerage. There's no minimum time set. So a holdover clause, they give an example. Let's say you're a seller. Your agreement includes a 30-day holdover clause. This means that even if your agreement has expired, under certain conditions, you may be obligated to pay the brokerage commission if you sell your home during the 30-day holdover period. If I was trying to sell your home and I had brought a buyer through, they decided to buy after the expiry, but it was within the holdover period, you'd still owe commission. Okay, so you want to make sure that you understand how long the holdover clause is, because it sort of is like prolonging your expiry date in a way. Now, understanding multiple representation. This means a designated representative or brokerage represents more than one client with competing interests in the same transaction. This can happen in different ways depending on the type of representation agreement you and other clients have with the brokerage. There's two types of multiple representation. One is brokerage. So multiple representation exists when the brokerage represents both the buyer and the seller in the same transaction, or with two or more competing buyers interested in the same property, even when the clients are working with different real estate agents. Again, it goes back to whether or not you've signed on with the brokerage or is it designated representation. So if you sign on with me, I'm your designated rep, the brokerage representation will not apply. If everybody signs on represented by the brokerage as a whole, there's more likely chance for multiple representation to occur. Now, under designated representation with multiple rep, it exists when the same real estate agent is a designated representative for both buyer and seller in the same transaction, or for two competing buyers interested in the same property, okay? So multiple representation, it's not permitted unless each client involved agrees, and you should seek your own advice before proceeding. The brokerage or your designated rep has a duty to promote and protect your best interests and avoid conflicts of interest. If this does occur and your brokerage or designated representative enters into an agreement with another client who has an interest in the same property as you, it places both clients in multiple representation, and this introduces risks you should consider. Are you guys having fun yet? It's a long document, but again, I think it's pretty straightforward. I think it's interesting. I think it helps people to understand. So with multiple representation, the risks associated is if you agree to multiple rep, the brokerage or designated representative must treat each of the clients involved in a more objective and impartial manner. So not really your best interest, but more just objective, cannot maintain undivided loyalty to you or promote and protect your interests over the interests of the other client. And we cannot offer advice about such things as the price or you should offer or the terms that should be included in an agreement of purchase and sale. So basically, if multiple rep is happening, let's say I represent two parties, okay, we're two people, buyers putting in an offer on the same house. I can't really advise you on price. I can't really advise you on conditions. You should put into your offer because I know what the other one is. I know the other offer on the table, okay? So if you're in multiple rep, there are some risks associated because you're not really getting the same client treatment you would if it wasn't the case of multiple representation. So what to expect before you agree to multiple representation. The brokerage is required to provide you with a written disclosure that explains how the brokerage's duties or designated representative duties will change, the differences in the services you'll receive, and any change to how much you may pay the brokerage. Okay, so again, if it was like one of those circumstantial situations with the seller and they said, you know, if there's multiple rep, I'm paying you less, then we need to make sure that that's outlined here. Until this information is disclosed in writing to all clients in the transaction and they all agree in writing, the brokerage cannot take any further steps on behalf of the client. So both parties need to be aware, they need to sign off the fact that it's okay, if it is in fact okay. Okay, and confidential information you provided to the brokerage or designated rep when you are represented cannot be shared without your consent. You can refuse multiple rep if you don't feel like your best interests are at heart here and you want your own representative who is not biased, who is not representing two people in a transaction. You can do that. So if you don't agree, the brokerage or your designated rep is not allowed to proceed. Ask the brokerage or real estate agent about alternatives to multiple rep. For example, if you're a buyer, the brokerage can refer you to another brokerage or another designated rep to help you make an offer on the property. Agreeing to multiple representation significantly reduces what the brokerage and its agents can do for you, which can have consequences and costs because we have to remain unbiased to two parties, which is quite difficult to do, okay? So if you don't like that and you are okay to work with someone else, you might wish to do that, and that's something that your agent or your brokerage representative can help you with. And then a note about content of other offers. So regarding open offers, you might have heard of open bidding, open offers. You may have seen articles in the media about this. Buyers in Ontario who have made an offer on a property are entitled to know the number of offers. Okay, so if you make an offer, you must know the number of competing offers. That has not changed. However, sellers choose how much other information they want to share about offers they receive. So if you're a seller, you can decide how much information you want to share about competing offers. Your agent will advise you based on the characteristics of your property, market conditions, and content of the offers you receive, and other things. You need to provide clear written direction to your agent before the content of any offers can be shared. Personal or identifying information cannot be shared. So this means that if you're a seller, You can share as much information as you want about the offers, but you must ensure that you've signed off that you are doing this and that no personal information is shared. So you cannot say this sale is conditional on the home sale of 123 Edward Street, because we can find out who lives at 123 Edward Street, right? So it's not confidential in that case, but you can let people know the top price. You can let people know the closing date for an offer, if there's any conditions, things like this, okay? And, excuse me, if you're a buyer, you decide whether or not you want to participate in this, okay? So you decide if you want to participate in the process and where the content of your offer might be shared with other buyers. Again, a seller can decide to do this at any moment. So, you might have to, in the moment, revoke your offer. Your agent can tell you the steps to take to avoid having the content of your offer shared with buyers. And be aware that the seller can make this decision to share the content of an offer anytime you might not know in advance, okay? So if you're not comfortable with the information being shared from your offer, let me know or let your agent know, and we'll be able to help you navigate that, okay? And then lastly, how to make a complaint. So brokerage firms and real estate agents working in Ontario must be registered with RECO, okay? And if you have a concern, RECO is asking to first contact the brokerage of the agent that you're having issues with, okay? In many cases, your brokerage will be able to mediate or resolve your complaint about a real estate agent or the services provided under the representation agreement. Search for the brokerage in RECO's public registrar to find the name of the broker of record. So the person who is responsible to ensure that we follow the rules. You're going to find them on that website and their contact info. And note the brokerage cannot ask you to sign an agreement that requires you to withdraw a complaint to RECO. So even if you contact the brokerage first, you talk to the broker of record, you can still make a RECO complaint as well. And you can contact RECO using this information if you wish to further escalate the complaint, okay? Okay, and finally, the last page, which is the acknowledgement. So your real estate agent will put their name, their brokerage name, as well as your name, and you must sign off that you received this guide and that you've had any questions you might have explained and answered by your realtor. So this concludes my lengthy video. I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you do have any questions about the information in the RECO information guide or about any of the new changes with TRESA or anything at all, please don't hesitate to get in touch. I am more than happy to go through this with you or explain in further detail, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Bye for now.